Hello, everyone. This is the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. Every week, we bring you people who are doing fascinating things around the world to make communities better. And our goal, as always, is to focus in on possibilities with education, innovation, and entrepreneurship as they might relate to service to others. And so what we do is we connect with people wherever they are in order to inspire people everywhere else. And this week, we have with us Darren Collins of Project Hand Up. He is currently in Nairobi in Kenya, and is going to tell us about his efforts there. He's done quite a bit of traveling in different parts of the world, which will be a part of his introduction. And I should also say he's a Rotarian. And he's a Rotarian in the DeSoto Club in Texas, near Dallas. And the work that he's doing in Nairobi at the moment is part of a global grant that has kicked into gear. So Darren, anything you need to correct on any of that, feel free. But it is a pleasure to have you. Welcome to Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley.
All right. Well, thanks, Rushton. I usually begin my presentations with, once again, my name is Darren. Everyone say, hi, Darren. But there's not going to be any feedback this time because I can't see you. But anyway, we are here at the offices just about a mile away from downtown Nairobi. I have actually injured myself recently, so life in Kenya is a little bit extra hard for me. So you may see my leg in the shot from time to time. But in any case, Project Hand Up is, as you said, a global grant between Rotary Club of Nairobi and the Rotary Club of DeSoto, but it's sort of a long time coming. I've been researching it for a long time because my classification is edutainer. So in Rotary, I'm the guy who marries entertainment and education together. And so my club agreed that they wanted to help do something that would fit within that classification after I sort of told them about a dream I had. To do something like that. But tell you what, how about we clearly define this? Because even though in the USA we're quite familiar with edutainment, I find out here in Kenya and some of the other countries, it's not quite as well known. Everyone gets it once I mention it, but the term edutainment is usually a little bit new. So I'm going to do a silly little magic trick. And what I have here is I've got three ropes here. I've got a big long rope, and I have a medium-sized rope. And what I've been doing is to introduce the concepts. I wish I could get further back. To introduce the idea of Rotary to people who aren't familiar with Rotary, I sort of made up a little example of edutainment and how it relates to Rotary itself. I've arbitrarily decided that Rotarians, as I've gotten to know them, sort of fit into three groups. Some of these guys in Rotary have a lot of time. They really do. They're the ones who are always helping out with service projects. A lot of pictures are taken of these folks. And so they get a lot of accolades. People know who they are. Rotarian magazine features these guys with all this time. And certainly we're very proud of those Rotarians who help so much. Then there's the Rotarians who don't necessarily have a whole lot of time, but they do have cash. They have the money. They're the ones who oftentimes are the guys who show up late, leave early, say hello, shake some hands, leave. And they're not really participants, a lot of these guys. I meet these guys. A lot of them they're sort of in the background. But when they believe in something, they write a check. And so there's the guys with all the time, and then to a lesser extent, the guys with the money. And then there's the Rotarians who are younger. They're starting their careers, starting their families. They don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of money. They certainly don't compare to these guys. But they are good networkers. They tend to be better at social media. A lot of these guys are in the e-clubs. But, you know, once again, it's arbitrary. But the idea is that they don't have a lot of time, not a lot of money. But, you know, as I get to know them, the cool part of being part of a global grant and doing the fundraising process and meeting so many people and speaking at all these clubs is I do get to have dinner with a lot of folks. And I meet a lot of people, and I realize upon further closer examination that even though they are very different, I find that they're all equal. I find that all three of these groups are valuable in their own way and equal in value. That is, the person who has a lot of time is no more important than the person who has all the cash, all the money, right? And that person's no more important than the one who is networking, the younger Rotarians. You know, they're all valuable, but we do judge. I see it. It's funny, actually. Rotarians are funny the way they treat each other, the way they talk. But sometimes we do see that, yeah, we look down. Hey, he hasn't really contributed to Paul Harris, you know? And or we say, hey, this guy is doing so much for us. But boy, let's get some more pictures of Sandy because she's just really killing it out there. So we see all these differences because the differences are, in fact, real. But as we should have learned already, in spite of these differences, we're all equal because we're all putting service above self. So that's edutainment. And I always like to begin my presentation that way. I started as a puppeteer when I was 19 years old, and I was teaching Sunday school teachers, youth pastors, cops, firemen, mental health workers, and elementary school teachers the art of using puppets like these for the purpose of doing early elementary and young kid entertainment, or education it is. And in that context, the first job that I had, I just traveled all over the country, 200 miles a day, putting on workshops. And for years and years, I was a workshop teacher, teaching people how to do creative performing arts, especially puppetry, for the sake of early education. And in that process, I had a lot of experience. It was quite amazing having a job like that right out of school. And over the years, I became the lead trainer for this organization that built professional puppets. They were a manufacturer of professional puppets that I worked for. And I was sort of their advertising arm, who also just taught people how to use these skills. And so a great thing happened is that the owner of the company at the time, it was called Puppet Productions out of San Diego, and then later Dallas, Texas. The owner of the company gave away these materials all the time, these puppets. I mean, they're really great little guys. I'll show Andy here. They're really high quality, TV quality, but designed for live presentations. Yeah, this is Andy. This is Andy here. I'm not a ventriloquist. No, your lips are moving. I understand that. That's not what I do. I think you're lazy. Okay. So anyway, this is Andy. This is the quality of puppets he was giving away. And so organizations around the world needed them, and so philanthropically, he would give away puppets. And when he did that, it was thousands of dollars worth of equipment. You know, that one puppet, Andy's like $130. So if you have a whole bunch of them, the price goes up. And some of these poor NGOs and charities and organizations around the world couldn't afford them. He would give them. But he hated the idea of anyone ever having these materials without also having instruction. So he would literally walk into my office, and I was in my early 20s, and he would say, like, Darren, you're going to China. Darren, you're going to Colombia. Darren, you're going to Cuba. Darren, you're going to Cambodia. Basically dangerous places that start with the letter C. That was essentially what it was. But it was cool because I got to see all these people using puppetry as an educational tool to transform the communities they were in. And one time we got a call from a guy, Dr. Michael Sampson, from Cambodia, who was working in Cambodia and innovating something that Rotarians are quite familiar with now. But he innovated it and sort of wrote the template for either UNICEF or the World Health Organization handbook, the ceramic seepage pot, the ceramic water filtration system. You could actually build it right there in the village for like 88 cents or something like that. And through the seepage would actually purify the water. And he was the guy who sort of wrote what is now in the handbook of how to do it. A great guy, but he called and wanted to use puppets. And I was fascinated. Like, what does a chemist want puppets for? And he said, well, I'll tell you. It's because we've identified the problem. And the solution, I think I've got it. I think I've got it to where the solution, the technological solution, makes sense. But without education to bridge the gap between the problem and the solution, it seems useless. You know, kids are coming up and getting clean water, but filling it up with, filling that dirty buckets with that clean water. And so, without the understanding of germ theory or waterborne illness or how that works, it doesn't matter about the technology. What we have to have is that education. So we started doing puppet shows. I flew over to Cambodia. We trained all the guys. I went back and forth year after year. It was so cool because 3 puppeteers would do this hour-long show in a school setting, teach all the kids, use magic tricks and stuff as well about diarrhea and waterborne illness, and just tell all the dirty details. It's a very private culture. They don't like talking about bodily fluids. Even the puppets themselves, a little boy puppet, a little girl puppet, couldn't touch hands. They couldn't touch each other in any way, because culturally it was inappropriate, and they're very sensitive about these issues. So talking about diarrhea is certainly not something that anyone wanted to do, but we could do it in the context of a puppet. There's something very special about a proxy that has the ability to communicate on really tough themes. And so we did that. And we had a magic trick too that taught about diarrhea. Can you imagine what that would be? We did this little, I remember I flew over one time to Phnom Penh. On the way, I stopped at Pike's Place Market in Seattle at the magic shop there. I was like, show me all the stuff you have on water. We're doing water. And so he showed me all these things and I go, I got a cool idea. And so we took this little cup of water. Imagine this, 3 puppeteers doing a puppet show. And one of them comes out and has a cup of water and it's going drip, 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 because there's a little hole in the bottom of the cup, right? And then we do the actual cure for diarrhea. Or not cure, but it would stop up the stomach and stop the dehydration. A tablespoon, I think it was, of sugar and like 6 or 7 tablespoons of salt, or reversed. It's been a long time. Anyway, we'd actually show them the exact combination of what it takes, stir it up, and with a little secret move with the pinky finger to put some sellotape over the hole, it would stop dripping. And everyone's like, oh, I see how it works. And of course, the children would go tell their parents, and the parents would give it to the toddlers, and then all of a sudden we have measurable change in the health of communities throughout Cambodia. It was quite incredible. I could go on and on about that process of working there years and years. But the point is that it really did make a difference. That inspired me beyond anything. And so my own career, at that time, by the time I was going and visiting Cambodia so much, my career turned into a professional juggler and magician. And I was doing educational school shows all over the USA and around the world. I kind of left puppetry behind, except for when I was teaching. And I was so inspired by that. And I just thought, you know, someday I want to do just that. I want to do development work with puppetry. And I thought I would work for Dr. Mickey Sampson, but he passed away 7 years ago last month of a heart attack right there out in the field. And so for me, I really had a gap that I wanted to fill. And so when I became a Rotarian, you know, I asked myself a series of questions, but all that about what I wanted to do with my life, really, and what I really wanted to do with Rotary, and it was, I want to use these puppets. Because what's incredible about the puppets is that they're especially good at communicating those hard to talk about topics. So Andy here, tell them about how powerful puppets can be.
Yeah, last year at the Super Bowl, you guys know how many commercials featured puppets?
Just go ahead and tell them, they're not going to answer.
It was 4.
It was not 4.
I know, but I have 4 fingers.
I know, you do. But it was 3 commercials, actually. Critical mass, 133 million people watching the Super Bowl, and they used 3 commercials to use puppets to sell things.
That's right, because even big business knows when you have all ages and everyone's gonna watch, use a puppet to sell Toyotas, pizzas, and websites.
Thanks, Andy.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, so that's it. But it's incredible, the puppet's ability to communicate to all ages. It's even more incredible how they could talk about sensitive issues. So I asked myself, okay, what would be the most difficult topic? Sexually transmitted disease was the answer I came to. And of course, HIV and AIDS being the #1 most devastating of the sexually transmitted diseases. And so I decided I would just start developing a program. And Project Hand Up is basically that. We take 3 puppeteers, we go into a village or a school, and we present for an hour, and we go over all the dirty details, all the things that teachers don't want to talk about, all the things that the curriculum isn't going to address, the things that pastors and moms and dads don't really want to say. We write it into fiction. We write it into a story. So it's not a lecture about something uncomfortable, but it's characters like these. They look kind of dead right now. I don't know, it's sad. But this is Yuna, and this is Bali. And in fact, and for little kids, you know, we're not going to talk about condoms necessarily, because, you know, they're just, you know, 1st and 2nd and 3rd graders. But what we can do is set them up to make good decisions later. And so these guys actually go through a sketch where she's got a banana and he wants it. And she says no. And he's like, hey, I'm a boy. I can have whatever I want. And we talk about consent, and we talk about gender equality through the concept of sharing a banana. And the themes come out very clearly, and the kids get it. The girls appreciate it because they learn they can say no. And a boy must stop trying after a girl says no. And it gets the idea of some of the themes that will later affect their lives in terms of sexual health. And we're all doing it and getting permission. I mean, we went to a school one time, and at this particular school, we knew some of the children were HIV positive. And we asked the headmaster, a woman, she's a very conservative Christian woman, which is common here in Kenya. A lot of the conservative issues occur here that also occurred in Cambodia. And we said, what do you do to talk about, you know, about sex? And she goes, oh, no, we don't. It starts and ends with a cold shower. That's it. And we're thinking, man, these kids are going to be teenagers soon, and they're HIV positive. You're not saying anything? And she's like, no, we don't talk about it. I said, well, can we do a puppet show? Oh, yeah, go ahead and do a puppet show. And we do all the dirty details. We tell them everything they need to know, and no one's offended because it's a puppet. And we did all the fundraising. You'll see in the links below, I have some pretty funny, interesting, we use an animatronic lion character that our club would sell to raise money. It would sing and dance and tell the 4-way test, and we'd sell these little miniature lions. I should have some running around. But we got the global grant going, and a lot of hardships. I've been volunteering on this project for a year now at this point. It was supposed to be 4 months, but life happened. we've already reached 19,348 kids with information they would never hear otherwise, in a way that's culturally appropriate, that speaks to them about the heart of the issues that are really tearing people apart. It's not even enough, honestly. Last week, the newspaper headline below the fold said AIDS #1 killer, age 10 to 24 here in Nairobi. There's not enough people getting the message. And we had the technology, we had the voluntary counseling and testing clinics, we have the antiretroviral drugs, we have technology, condoms, contraception, but without education to bridge that gap, and a way to do it that's not going to offend people and turn them away. This is an incredible way. You gotta watch the videos. You gotta see the faces. Some of these pictures in that video you'll see below are of kids who have been sitting there for an hour and they're still engaged. And so that's the epitome of what Project Hand Up is all about. And my idea is to take this global grant and launch it right into an NGO. I set up a 501c3 nonprofit in Texas to handle some of the things that Rotary wouldn't handle. But now it's time to really go forward, because the proof of concept is finished. We've reached 20,000 kids. We're seeing measurable change, and the dream is really being realized. And so that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of links that I added to this video that you guys can check out, the Facebook page especially. But that's my time. So Rushton, where are you at, buddy?
Fantastic. Yeah, wonderful story, a wonderful effort going on. And just to kind of launch us into our Q&A time, I'm thinking that you have some pictures you can show that tell a little bit about some of the things that you've discussed. Is that right?
Yeah, sure, man. I do have a few things. What's really great, man, is I thought I was alone in this, right? Like this Rotarian who's doing puppetry to teach about AIDS. Turns out the past president of the Rotary Club of Nairobi, Cristal, is 88 years old. And this guy brought puppets to East Africa for the first time back in 1991, and has been doing development work. And when he saw our grant, he said, I want to do one more project before I retire from Rotary.
Very nice.
I mentioned that because I think right here, that's the view from his office. And he lets me use his office, man. That's the Nairobi National Park. It's so beautiful. It's so nice. But this is my office. We got shot up last 2 nights ago. The police were chasing after kidnappers. And it was the first time, Russian, it's 8:20 here p.m. We usually have guys here all night long working on other things along with the global grant. And luckily we weren't there. But that's scary, I guess. I haven't showed Mom yet. She doesn't know. But this is a picture from, we just went to an orphanage of all HIV positive children. And boy, these guys really resonated with this show because we talk about stigma so much. That was really nice. And so it really warms my heart to do it for this particular group. It was really cool. This is the view from my front door where I live. Sometimes when I'm working, the baboons come right up to the front door. But the process, Rushton, is what's really interesting. We actually wrote all of this stuff after we researched here in Kenya. The guys who did the original McGruff the Crime Dog campaign for the National Crime Prevention Council, they're the ones who wrote all the curriculum there in USA. Then I sent it to Hollywood, and I know the guy who kind of, there's a place, I kind of know the guy who wrote the Minions movie, the little yellow guys, you know, and he did all the script editing, Rushton. And so he made it tighter, funnier, you know, just that great Hollywood humor. But then we sent it to these guys here. These guys are writers and voice actors for the top comedy shows in East Africa. And they provide the voices. You see, we record the voices in Swahili, pre-recorded, so the performers don't have to know the target language. That way, any volunteer, Rotarian or anyone, or any puppeteer from anywhere in the world can help us out, because we have writers who know comic timing perfectly for this target audience and also know the language. And it's recorded by one of the best hip hop and producers. This guy here, he produces all the shows that Disney sends over to turn into Swahili. So we have really the top guys in education, entertainment, in USA and America, kind of working on the soundtracks and the puppet show. So that's part of it. That's near where I live. I live in the artist community, these Rotarians. If anyone comes to Kenya, come here. This Rotarian and his wife run a glass blowing place, and they make beads, and they do painting and metal works and everything, and they have guest cottages. So the guys from the embassies always come out to where we live and live out there. These are the puppets we're using. Pretty nice quality. I love these guys. Pretty cool. That's an audience. This is how many kids we can reach all at once, Rushton. It's incredible. Look how engaged their faces are. I mean, I could not have asked for a better response from this show. You know, leaping into a global grant and doing this for the first time, I had no idea. And there's them putting their hands up. Yep, there we go.
Fantastic. So when you started doing this, I mean, like, what was the first time you went overseas? So, you know, you'd mentioned China and Cuba and Cambodia. What was the first time that you left the United States to do work like this?
You know, I grew up as a church kid. I'm not really in that place anymore, but we did, you know, mission trips. So we've been building houses in Mexico, I think was the first time age 15 or 16, something like that. And then right away, after I went into the real world, age 19 and 20. So 1998, I went to Singapore. I think that was the first place I taught puppetry. I've taught like 20,000 puppeteers around the world. So that's really probably what I'm best at is that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And in doing kind of a train the trainer, you know, I mean, what do you find to be, you know, kind of a common barrier or a you know, particularly challenging piece of getting people to take on the idea that this is something that they should do within their own communities? Is it just a sense of, can I really make a living doing this, or what is it?
Yeah, well, being a puppeteer is not a good way to make a living, so that's difficult. You would have to find, you know, we have to find sponsoring organizations. I mean, at this point we're looking for individuals and clubs to help sponsor like a show per month, you know, that sort of thing. But the biggest barrier for training other people is a lot of this perception. A lot of people really think it's just for kids or it's silly until they see it in action. They have to really be part of a show or see a show, and then they catch the vision. They're sold. I mean, we just talked with Doctors Without Borders and another big foundation here, and once they saw it, you know, they're golden. But up until then, it's like, it's for kids, it's silly. That's the hard part. Every culture is the same. Everyone thinks it's for children. And honestly, the administrators are the ones who really focus during our shows, because a lot of them are hearing this for the first time. A lot of Rotarians, when I do a presentation, they don't know that HIV is not in saliva. You know, these little facts that a lot of people just don't ever pick up on, and they would have no occasion to learn it. Put it in a puppet show, and even the adults are like, oh, interesting, you know.
Yeah, and of course, every message that is well delivered becomes something that is remembered and reinforced over time. Yeah. Yeah,
and what's beautiful about some of this stuff is that, like, you don't really have to teach it more than once. If it's very clear, if the story is very clear, and the magic trick that I would do with it is also very clear, like, they got it. They got it. There's no retelling. And real quickly, we do use a lot of magic, and the reason why is because if you see a magic show, generally something appears, it disappears, it transforms from one thing to another thing, it transfers from one place to another, or it multiplies. That's the most common techniques. There's a few more, but those are also sort of medical ideas. The appearance of a disease in someone's life, remission, the transfer from one location to another location, the transformation that occurs in someone's body when they're infected, and the multiplication, the spread of the disease. So visually, we can paint these sort of metaphors by using cool little magic tricks that reinforce the fictional stories. So one time, you know, if we do it right, they got it. They'll memorize it.
You know, your presentation has brought to mind a couple of recent recordings that we've done, just other speakers. You know, we had a guy talking to us about the State of the Union on sports, right? And one of the things he said was that, you know, the opportunity to take what you're really passionate about and to use it in such a way that it can be helpful to others is huge, right? I mean, and that should be a message for every Rotarian, right? You know, whatever it is you just love to do, find a way to marry that with the kinds of service efforts that might be going on with your club.
That's exactly it. Last night we had a Rotaract club, and they asked me the question, like, how are you sticking with it? It's been a year. How are you sticking with it? And honestly, Rushton, it's been the hardest year of my life. On day one, orientation day, the puppeteer we recruited years ago with this in mind, the cornerstone of our group, passed away in the pool right after lunch. And she was the cornerstone of the group. We all loved her to death. Our host family that I was staying with when we were trying to find a host Rotary club, they got in a car accident in November and died. The mom and auntie. And then we crashed 2 cars. I busted my foot. My house back in Texas completely fell apart from the rains. Foundation, roof, decks, everything. Like, it just, all this tragedy occurring back home as well. And so it's been really stressful. But I said, listen, does not matter, because I asked myself 3 questions. Number 1, what do you love to do? So I made a list of all the things I love to do. And then of those things, what am I actually good at? Because let's be honest, just because you love something doesn't mean you're good at it. And so I narrowed the list down. And then I asked a 3rd question. I said, of those things, of the things you love to do that you're best at, which one of them can help the most amount of people? What will plug the biggest hole? And I thought, well, teaching puppetry, love it. Probably the best at teaching, training others. And of course, what is the best use of that tool? I think it's talking about the tough stuff. The really hard to, the culturally sensitive things. That's what it's best at. And of course, sexually transmitted disease, HIV, and then target the area, sub-Saharan Africa. That's where we begin. And for that reason, it's no problem. I can deal with all these tough things because I really love it, man. I really do.
Getting into that point where you look back and you go, man, that was hard. And it was so incredibly meaningful. I had a similar experience a few years ago when a group of us went to the rural Philippines to help teachers there. And, tough stuff, right? But those people were so amazing. It was just totally worth it. It was worth the challenges that were part of it.
Yeah. And the puppeteers here, they appreciate it so much. I mean, it's interesting because, like, we can't pay them that much. I mean, we're it's a Rotary grant. It's not all about overhead. We can't do that. So we pay them what we can. But man, these guys are passionate about the subject matter because so many people have had this affect their families. And it's not easy in any country to say, Mom, Dad, I'm going to be a puppeteer. That's not what anyone wants to hear in America, generally speaking. And in Kenya, they're like, come on, you went to business school. What's going on? How come you're doing this? But they believe in it. And so they really say, no, listen, I'm going to do this. And they really are passionate. You saw the guy come in earlier before we started, give me a big hug. That's Zimmy. He was a Kenyan dancer who traveled around the world in an acrobat troupe. And then when the bottom fell out of that industry, what's this artist going to do? He wants to do puppetry, and he wants to tell his peers about HIV and AIDS. I'm so glad I could plug him in, man.
So that innovative component that's important for, I think, successful service efforts anywhere. I mean, often seems to come down to, here's somebody who can look at this and can look at this and say, there's a way these 2 things can work together. And I think that's probably like one of the things that is characteristic of so many of the very coolest things we've heard from our speakers. We had a speaker tell us about, he was working with orphanages. And I was thinking about this when, you showed the picture of or you mentioned the orphanage before. And he said, like, these kids don't have anything of their own history, nothing. And so what I'll do is I'll get somebody there to take a picture of every kid, and then I'll set up a business that connects with high schools in the United States, and high school art students will create, they'll paint portraits, and we'll send these portraits to the kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. That longevity, the history.
Yeah. Matter of fact, and before we forget, make sure to let me know kind of, who your contact is at the orphanage, and we'll see if we can get them connected with Ben Schumacher, and maybe, they can do some of this as well.
Yeah. Well, so the challenge now is, where do we go from here? I'm going to continue to do, fundraising and stuff, but what I figured out through this process is how cheap we can make it go. An initiative like this can start off clunky, but now we got it down to where we can get to a school and do as many shows at that school as possible. And some of these schools are 1,500 kids, some of them are 15 kids. Depends if it's private or public or state run or church run or whatever. but for 85 bucks. 85 bucks. And so 1,500 kids for 85 bucks, that's pretty cool. And so what I'm trying to find is like individuals, clubs, organizations, anyone who would just like do a recurring donation, like $85 a month. And then we send like that picture of the kids holding the sign, say, hey, these kids are because of, you know, Rushton, or because of the eClub, or because my club sponsors, of course. And so I'm pretty proud of that number. Like, I'm trying to get it lower, of course. I'll do the best I can. But that's also part of the entrepreneur part of it, is like, okay, how do I make this work? And then like really make sense, you know, and then how quickly can I port it to another language? Because now Nairobi's not the hot spot. Really, it's Kisumu on the west, where everyone speaks Luo. That's where infection rates are 1 in 5. But we don't have a Luo show right now. But as soon as I have, you know, I think it's going to be like $4 or $5, maybe $5,500. I can go to the radio stations that target those guys, get those presenters to retranslate and re-record. We can send the same crew who doesn't know Luo and get them out there in that region. So now I'm thinking of, okay, how do I replicate the program? How much does it cost to actually, you know, what if I had to go to Nigeria or Ghana or something like this, you know? So that's also kind of fun to figure that out.
Very cool. Well, we've run kind of our time, so I will wind things down, and then I'll pass it back to you for like a final thought. We always like to ask our speakers for final thought before we finish. Okay. But all of our members and guests, make sure you do the attendance survey below. Let us know you were here. Rotarian guests, by doing that properly, that'll generate an email that you can share with your club secretary for a makeup for a missed meeting, and we any kind of spammy, you know, kind of situation or anything like that. It's all good there. But just let us know you were here. And then a little farther down, you'll see the Discuss, D-I-S-Q-U-S, the Discuss section, where you can log in using an account you create quickly, or using a Google or Facebook or a Twitter account or whatever, just to log in and leave a comment. We love to hear people's comments about what they see. They come up with connections. They say, hey, you know, a program like this, you know, should be in touch with people over here. Let us know what you think. It's those kinds of connections that create new opportunities. So as always, we're excited to be able to share these kind of thoughts with you. And certainly, Darren, we are ecstatic to have had you on and to tell your story. And so if you've got kind of a final thought for the group, feel free.
Sure. Project Handout is an acronym, which you can see, but it also is about a call to action. And the call to action I would ask you is, if you today would make the decision to treat someone who lives with HIV with dignity and respect, would you put your hand up? If you promise to know, for yourself and your friends and your community, to get tested regularly, would you put your hand up? And if you're a Rotarian who will put service above self, please put your hand up.
Excellent. And so to all of our members and guests, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.